Welcome to Tamer Bowling Video Ball Reviews. If you like what we do, please support us by joining our Patreon page. A big thank you to Jeff Miller and Ron Hoppy. Don't forget to check out Haley's Pro Shop in Burlington, Washington for world-class drilling and coaching.
All right, welcome back everybody. Today I want to continue a series we started last year known as Tamers' Favorite Bowling Balls. We have the 2019-2020 edition. But today I have a feature for you to initiate the series a little differently this year. So I want to go into an explanation, and I think ultimately it'll help you with arsenal building. So that's what I'm going to spend a little time on today. The series last year seemed to be very popular, so I do want to kind of continue that. So let me kind of explain how I'm going to run through it this year and how it relates to arsenal building, and then we'll jump into balls with future videos. So last year I focused on ball categories as defined by the manufacturer. In other words, we looked at pearl, hybrid, solid, symmetrics versus asymmetrics, right? So I think we did 6 categories. However, as I started to think about it, I realized that this is not exactly how I put an arsenal together, and frankly, probably not how you should put an arsenal together. Sometimes it's easy enough to go, oh, such and such a ball is a solid asym, so it should be the strongest ball in the bag, right? However, even in those cases, motions can vary significantly from brand to brand. Additionally, hybrids can sometimes act more like a solid or a pearl depending on what the manufacturer does. This time I want to focus on, like I said, arsenal building, and that means I want to categorize the bowling balls as it relates to where it would fit in an arsenal. With that in mind, let's introduce the categories so you know where we're going. All right, I'll call them out and then we'll go through them. The first one is, number 1 is the strong defined category. Number 2 is the strong control. Number 3 is mid defined. Number 4 is mid control. Number 5 is mid late. And 6 is weak. So let's jump in. Strong defined, first category. What is that? This category is reserved for the strongest pieces, what I would call the top of the bag. But they should also have the characteristic of making a defined move when they read. And these balls will typically read the lanes just ahead of the end of the pattern and will have a visibly strong defined move down lane. So the 2 characteristics we're looking for here is that the ball's strong enough to read before the end of the pattern, and it has a fairly defined, visible move down lane. All right, second category. Second category is the strong control. And this category is designed to capture the next tier where you still need a pretty strong ball, but don't quite need as defined, aggressive a move the strong, defined balls provide. So this will likely read at a similar point on the lane, slightly before the end of the pattern, but will have a smoother transition of skid to hook to roll. Think of these as strong, smoother balls. Smooth doesn't mean weak. Okay, third category is mid-defined. This category is set up to cover the balls that get down the lane longer than the strong defined category or even the strong control. So maybe need the end of the pattern to react, but still make a defined move. So these balls will be the longer and on the more angular side type balls. Okay, the next category is the mid-control category. And this category is reserved for, again, longer balls than your strong balls. So they want to see some friction from the pattern, but are smoother pieces. So think of these as your benchmark balls or step down from the strong control category. They need a bit more friction than that group, but are still smooth. And they tend to be very versatile, middle of the road balls. Okay, the next category is mid-late. These balls will tend to be clean and angular. They require a bit more friction than the strong category, and that's the trend. but will also respond to that friction at the end of the pattern more aggressively. These balls will feel like they're not difficult to get down lane and also have strong motion at the end of the pattern. The final category I'm going to talk about is what I call weak. This final category is for the type of ball that requires lower volumes of oil to hook. They'll likely have little hook on heavier volumes and are more useful when patterns break down and open up. Sometimes this category can be pushed upstream for a certain bowler by adding surface to the ball. All right, now that we've discussed the categories, the next set of videos will get into my favorite balls in each of these categories. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for those. All right, welcome back. Today I'm focusing on my favorite bowling balls of 2019-2020, and I'm starting with the strong defined category. If you haven't watched the intro video and arsenal building video, I suggest you do so first to understand what we're doing with the categories this year. This first installment will cover the highest category, if you will, the what I call strong defined category. Very briefly, this category is for the strongest pieces or the top of the bag. The two characteristics we're looking for, as I mentioned in the first video, are one, the ball is strong enough, both cover and core, to read before the end of the pattern, and two, it has a fairly defined, visible move down lane. Now, I have 6 balls I'll be talking about today, but only a 1 through 3 ranking. It'll make sense as we go on, so let's just jump in. All right, the number 3 strong defined ball for 2019-2020 is the Storm Physics. This ball was number 5 on my ASIM hybrid list last year. And there are 5 balls still ahead of it for me this year in this newly defined category, strong defined. However, this ball is still available and it continues to make the top of the list. This year it's number 3 in this newly minted category, mostly because it is actually the weakest of this particular bunch. It has a great shape, which is recognizable and syncs with many bowlers. I really like this core. It's not quite strong enough to be the top of my bag, but not quite weak enough to be more usable on house shots as often as I would like. For me, I have to keep the cover fresh quite often. So that's our number 3, the Storm Physics. Okay, the number 2 spot. Number 2 spot has a 3-way tie, and let me get into it. Firstly, I'm keeping a focus on currently available balls. I don't think I discussed this ball previously, but the Ebonite Choice is truly one of my personal favorites in this category. The issue is, while it's still in the lineup technically, it's no longer really available to the general public with the Brunswick acquisition of Ebonite International. So, that's why it kind of has, the sort of last of the number 2 group, if you will. The second ball in this category is the Motive Jackal Ghost. This was my top pick last year. It's number 2 with a tie for a few reasons. One, it's still available, but older now. I also no longer have it in my personal arsenal, but one I love so much that I have no problem recommending it to anyone for this category. And so that brings me to probably the true number 2 for me, simply because it's the latest available ball that ranks this highly, and that is the Storm Omega Crux. I'm not going to rehash the ball's characteristics. You can watch the full video review for that. But this is the precise example of why I wanted to get away from the previous Pearl ASIM categories and use the new ones. This comes out of box from Storm, designed to be one of the top balls. It's got a lot of surface. And I've personally put lots of surface on strong Pearl ASIMs because it creates one of my favorite ball reactions. You can use surface to get the early read necessary for this category, but you'll also get the more defined move from the core and the pearl in the cover. So the number 2 ball, probably the true number 2 ball, is the Storm Omega Crux. All right, we are at number 1. Number 1 spot is truly a toss-up for me, and this bodes well for the two brands with the top spot. They're both current balls, and if you're a fan of either brand, it's easy to recommend either ball. So the tie for number 1 is the Rotogrip UFO and the Motive Alpha Jackal. These two balls are very similar overall, to be honest. Colors aren't even that different. The main difference is that the UFO has a bit more of that typically sharper move off the friction, while the Alpha Jackal has more of the quintessentially smoother Motive motion. Motive has made a bunch of really good solid covered bowling balls, and it shouldn't be surprising that the Jackal is at the top of my list. I can say that if you're looking for the top dog in your bag, even though Motive has monopolized the name, both the Alpha Jackal and the Rotogrip UFO can fill this spot. All right, so that's the first group, again, that we called strong defined. So if you're building an arsenal and you're looking for the top of the bag, these 6 balls can definitely be strong options, but they are my personal favorites. All right, welcome back everybody to the Tamers Favorites Bowling Balls for 2019-2020. Today I'm talking about the strong control category. So again, if you didn't see the explanation video, check it out. It explains the new categories, helps you look at how to build an arsenal. This category is a step down from the category 1, which is the strong defined category. Specifically, they are smoother down lane. They should still be reading slightly earlier than the end of the pattern. And it'll make sense when you kind of see what fits in as we talk through the balls. But again, this is about arsenal building, okay? So this is essentially the strong, smooth ball in your bag. Again, I'll talk about 6 balls, but covering spots 1 through 4 this time. And that means there's another tie or 2 somewhere, so let's jump in. Okay, the number 4 ball is the 900 Global Volatility. This is an interesting one. Some might think this ball could fit in the first category as the top of the bag. However, in my testing, this ball is much smoother than those balls. And since the top of the bag of arsenal building, in my personal estimation, should be a strong defined motion, the volatility motion doesn't really fit there for me. It definitely reads before the pattern, but is very slow and smooth down lane. And that to me, defines it into this category. And it's a really good ball in that regard. All right, number 3 ball is a pseudo tie. I'm gonna start with the Track Tactics. This is a mild asymmetric ball, but for me, it's not huge side to side, and I think that's probably the case for most bowlers. Just gives me supreme control, feeling early enough to read the pattern while still having good drive, even if it's not sideways as a defined angular down lane motion of the bigger asyms. It stays fundamentally because it's still in the lineup, but will eventually be scarce as the pre-Brunswick EBI balls are phased out. And so with that in mind, I'm gonna say that the true number 3 for me is the Storm Pro Motion. This is a ball I can easily recommend in a handful of recommendations I would make for this slot. In my mind, spec works significantly better with this application over any other that Storm has used it. The core has strong transitions, but the cover smooths it out. So you get smooth and strong. What slightly holds it back is, as you use it, it actually starts to slip into the next category of mid-control as the cover just has less bite the more games you have on it. And that's probably true with any ball, But I can see this ball walking the line for some between the strong control and the mid control to the next category, which kind of keeps it out of the top spots essentially. Okay, the number 2 is a true tie to me. Both balls are current lineup balls in their respective brands. Both balls use very strong covers and have a smooth, continuous motion. Yeah, maybe it's a cop-out to have two number 2s, but honestly, I would be happy with either ball, and that's the standout factor to me. First, the Motive Rogue Assassin. It's a great option in the strong control category. Motive has, again, made some fantastic solids. And this is the same cover as the Jackal Ghost, which you all know, I love. Then add the Sigma core to it. We loved the Rogue Blade in our favorites last year. The bottom line is this ball seemed to work for all our testers, but more importantly for me. And then the other number 2 is the Storm Axiom. This is one we just tested recently. Strong cover, reliable smooth move. I mentioned I can replace the Phase 2 in my bag and I wouldn't be hurt. I think that's high praise considering we're talking about the Phase 2. With that, you might ask, where is the Phase 2? Well, on to number 1, and the king of the strong control category remains the venerable Phase 2. I know I'm not alone in feeling this is a great ball. You can't watch a single PBA show without seeing one or two of these rolling down the lane. A fresh Phase 2 is particularly strong. In fact, I could argue that it could even fit in the strong defined category, first couple of games out of the bag. However, just get a few games on it, it settles dead squarely and beautifully into this strong control category. And while I could theoretically replace this with the Axiom, I don't have to because I still have the Phase 2. All right, so there you have my personal favorites in the strong control category. This is basically ball number 2 in your arsenal of, say, a 5 to 6 ball bag. All right, welcome back to the Tamers Favorites Series 2019-2020. This time I want to move on to the next category, the mid-defined. If you didn't watch the explanation video, please go ahead and check that out. In short, the mid-defined category is a step down from the strong defined category. Okay, so the strong defined is your number 1 top of the bag ball. The short version is when you still want angular motion but need more length, you pick up a mid-defined ball out of the bag. You've probably watched some of the other favorite videos by now, but in this one, I have a clear 1 to 5 order of balls. Some of the factors are, availability, and most current pieces. But these balls are all great pieces, of which, do have some nuances for selection. And these are my favorites for 2019-2020. Okay, let's start with number 5. Number 5 ball is the Columbia Savage Life. In my mind, this was one of the best Pearl ASIMs EBI has offered in a while, but more importantly, in the mid-defined category. And you saw this ball a lot on TV as well. Good length and angular move down lane. It's probably a touch cleaner than I want, which just means it theoretically can border between mid-defined and another category I have, which is mid-late. So it's number 5 and not, higher in the ranking for 2 reasons. First is that for me personally, I want a ball that squarely fit in a category to make creating an arsenal easy and then choosing the ball when I need it easy. And second is that with the Brunswick acquisition, this ball's likely phasing out. And that takes us to number 4. Here we have the Storm Astrophysics. This is just about the quintessential skid flip ball. I do love the core, like I mentioned, with the physics. My biggest concern with this ball is the use of the R2S Pearl cover. And really, it's similar to my concern with the Savage Life. The Astrophysics has the same fate. The medium cover strength makes this one, for my personal arsenal, sort of border in a sense between mid-defined and mid-late. And I don't want confusion when I'm picking a ball, when I'm taking a ball out of the bag, when I'm on the lanes. So from the left side, honestly, I want less skid flip and a bit stronger cover for this particular category. It's still a great ball, hence making my top 5. So moving on to number 3, and that is the very popular Phase 3. This ball has received huge market hype, and much of it is deserved. It's the quintessential long and strong ball reaction. The ball gets down lane very easily, and the core can shape almost like a strong asim. So why number 3? Well, you have to be in my shoes. A lefty rarely needs this much skid flip. Too clean, too sharp. Of course, with all of these balls, I can adjust surface. However, while I do like the R3S cover in a few incarnations, I found that the R3S hybrid in particular, a little surface changed the base characteristic a bit too much for me. So out of the box, it straddled the mid-defined and mid-late, same as the previous two. But with surface, it almost turns in like completely something else, into mid-control. And honestly, that's just too confusing in my opinion for me and my personal arsenal in this category, which keeps it out of the top 2 spots, but still a great ball. Okay, number 2. Now we're getting into the balls I can truly and easily put in my personal bag for this slot. The number 2 ball is the Hammer Black Widow Pink. This is another old DBI ball that will likely need to be reincarnated by Brunswick in the future. You probably have a limited time to find one as stock dwindles. But while other balls so far have been quintessential skid flip, for me, this is more quintessential mid-defined ball, this category. It uses a strong pearl cover with a strong core that is capable of big motion. What makes this ball better for me than the previous 3 is that it doesn't go quite as long before it reads. And that makes all the difference in the world. It's very versatile and can be adjusted within its range, keeping it in the same category essentially. All right, finally we've reached number 1, and for me that is the Rotogrip Nuclear Cell. The Nucleus core has continued to be a staple for Rotogrip, just like the gas mask has been for Hammer, and they just work. And there's a clear ball motion difference for me between this ball and the pink. However, they both squarely fit in this mid-defined category. Remember, I said there could be variations of ball reaction, but while still fitting in a category. The nuclear cover is an even stronger pearl, but it doesn't take away from its ability to still almost go sideways off the end of the pattern. And while you might say, I thought you don't like sideways, that's true. However, the cell core is a heavy rolling core, so that heavy earlier roll balances the hard cover response to lead to a very understandable motion, and it kind of makes it somehow magical. So, my personal number 1 is easily the Rotogrip Nuclear Cell. We've talked a lot about loving pearl asims, and that is fundamentally because mid-defined balls tend to work well on house shots and are versatile. And these 5 balls can fit in your bag in this slot depending on the type of bowler you are. For my game, the last 2 balls are very clear head and shoulders above the others in this category, and I can live with either one easily. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out the rest of the series. Welcome back. This time, I want to talk about my favorites for 2019-2020 in the mid-control category. This category is essentially your middle-of-the-road benchmark. I don't want to use the term benchmark in the mid-control category because, again, how you create your arsenal can vary, but I think most people will kind of feel that way. And this could be the ball that tells you what's going on with the pattern. It's not too strong, it's not too weak, it's not too angular, not too soft. But whatever it is, it's the ball that your eye tells you what's going on. And I don't want to box you into this category, always being benchmark, because the more important characteristic is that it's a medium strength with good control. And spoiler alert, there's gonna be a tie here. So let's start with number 4, the Hammer Orange Vibe. This is another old EBI ball that's out of production but still available. This is the type of ball that can be a house shot killer. The proper length to avoid falling into the mid-late category, and have that easily controllable and understood smooth motion. It's limited in its ability to go up my list because, again, the availability of the old EBI equipment. All right, the number 3 ball is the Track Train Elite. This is another ball I will be sad to lose from the market. The re-release has been an excellent fit into this category. Again, a ball that fits squarely in this group. It's versatile enough to use on sport and house shots. Nice, smooth, reliable read and punch. The only call out with this ball seemed, that it seemed to hate surface done on the spinner for some reason. Surface by hand was perfect, so I would recommend sticking with that if you have this ball. All right, the next one. What do you know? Another ball we're losing. The number 2 goes to the Columbia 300 Black Chaos. I have to admit, I love black bowling balls and solid colors in general, but this ball has a perfect blend of clean and angular for me. I will say, perhaps out of the box with that high shine, it may be more the next category, which is mid-late type of ball, but take that shine off, and you have a great mid-control ball. I really enjoy this ball. Honestly, I consider stashing a couple. It's just a type of motion that you trust will go down lane without feeling flippy. And that's really the definition of mid-control. For those who might be familiar, I kind of almost hearken to the way I felt about my V2, but after some usage. I know the V2 was re-released, but the Black Chaos was a great ball for me. All right, well, at some point we have to get to balls that are actually still being sold by their manufacturer, or produced anyway. And we're finally there for the number 1 slot. And since I spoiled this before, the number 1 is a tie between 2 balls that probably couldn't be more different, but yet strangely fit in the same category. And these are the Rotogrip Idol Pearl and the Radical Squatch Hybrid. At this point, you might be confused, but let me explain. The Idol Pearl has a strong enough cover, even while being a pearl, to fit in the mid-control. Really, a touch of surface makes it fit smack dab in the middle of this category. It may have perhaps a touch more back end, making it, somehow straddle the mid-defined and mid-control category for some, but honestly, its smoothness makes it more easily controlled, which pushes it, squarely into this category for me personally. And again, this is another ball that you see all the time on TV. It works, and it's very versatile. Left side, right side, doesn't matter. Now, the other number 1 is the Radical Squatch Hybrid. It doesn't turn as hard as the Idol Pearl down lane. It doesn't allow as much left to right flexibility. But when you have a slot that works, it makes that area wide and carries very well. And that's what makes the Squatch Hybrid special. It tells me what I need to know about the lane. It blends pretty well, carries pretty well. And that's why, despite being vastly different from the Idol Pearl, I consider it a number 1 for me. Ultimately, for any individual, selecting one or the other in your arsenal will likely shape your other options so that they relate well. Even for me, if I was bringing the Squatch Hybrid, for example, the other balls in the bag are likely different than if I were to bring the Idol Pearl. And that, so like I said, it kind of shapes your overall arsenal. I'm sure someone will say I missed something out there. There's still High Roads, Game Breakers, Venom Shocks, you name it. But, for 2019, 2020, these balls are my personal favorites that actually have a shot to be or are in my current arsenal. So that covers the mid-control category. Next will be the mid-late category. So if you missed the strong defined, strong smooth, mid-defined, go back and check them out. See you in the next episode. All right, by now you should have checked out several of my favorites for 2019-2020 and a new categorization that's intended to help you create an arsenal. Today I'll be looking at my favorite mid-late category. This category is essentially the balls that are cleaner than your mid-control sort of benchmark balls and are more angular. Typically you're step down when the lanes open up. They can always have more uses depending on your style or if you alter surface finishes. Again, if you haven't watched the category explanation video, the arsenal building video, please check it out. All right, the number 5 ball in the mid-late category is the Storm Emerald IQ. Before you crucify me how this ball could only be number 5, keep in mind this is my personal view and I simply do not have this ball in my bag. The good is that it is a very good ball. Clean, smooth, but punchy. It's kind of like a baby mid-control ball, which makes perfect sense for a mid-late ball. The bigger issue is that it almost falls into the next category down for me as a lefty, which is the weak category. So fundamentally, I rarely see conditions to use this ball. And even with surface, I prefer other balls in this category. But to my eye, I do love this motion. So for some, this ball is a no-brainer. Because it somehow straddles the line between mid-late and weak for me, it tops out at number 5 in this category. All right, on to number 4. It might seem strange to have a Pearl ASIM in this slot, but the 900 Global Honey Badger Extreme Pearl is my number 4. I called it a baby no rules pearl in my video, and if the no rules pearl slots in the mid defined, this one slots in the mid late. The big thing with this one is that it easily feels like a step down, but still very controllable. It responds to friction, but relatively slowly for a pearl, which makes it controllable but still punchy. I've had a few opportunities to slot this ball in the bag. Number 3 is a bit more typical of what you might think to put in this slot, the Rotogrip MVP Pearl. This easily fits into the mid-late category. It's clean, but not as long as you would anticipate. Because the ball still wants to read near the end of the pattern rather than way after, it still has a great back-end motion. And that makes it a ball that you can confidently slot here. I call this, slot mid-late. But these are the type of balls I enjoy in this category. I actually still want to get some read and not have a really long and snappy look, which would fit more in the weak catch-all category. All right, number 2. I probably couldn't have the top 5 without this ball. Granted, it's another ball that probably has very limited availability now with the acquisition by Brunswick. However, Hammer Staffer rarely had a TV show appearance and not thrown one at some point. It has the same characteristics I described for the MVP Pearl. We're talking about the Hammer Rodman Pearl. It's clean, yes, but still reads the end of the pattern instead of scooting long past it. It has a strong, later move. It should be a great complement to your mid-control ball. Time will tell what Brunswick offers in its place. I think they have to put something in there. It's such a stalwart. I will say I did have to adjust that factory surface, which you probably should do with any ball you get because you can't replicate it. Factory surface just made it too long, but once you adjusted that, it fit perfectly in this category. All right, on to the number 1. Some might think the world has been flipped upside down. I have a tie with my top mid-late category, and neither is from the Utah brands. The Brunswick Melee Jab SE, a special edition, and the Motive Supra are my top picks here. The Melee Jab has been a great ball since the first release and continued with the special edition. It's essentially like Brunswick's Marvel Pearl. Too bad Storm doesn't have that ball in the lineup anymore. That definitely will make the list. But back to the winners, the Melee Jab again feels easy to get down lane, but because of the rolly core, it doesn't read too late. It has that boomy, rounded, angular motion. It's very reliable, and I love that in this slot. For the other ball, the Motive Supra, Motive has come a long way when it comes to pearl cover stock technology. In that regard, the Supra is a spectacular piece. And while EJ Tackett might make every ball look great, the Supra is the best look I've ever had with a Motive pearl. It's a little closer, I would say, to a flippy ball than the Melee Jab. Similar length, but a bit more backhand. In the end, both balls are easily the top of my options when it comes to filling the mid-late category in my arsenal. Are there other balls out there that fit in this category? Absolutely. My list is not meant to say those aren't good balls, but these just happen to be my personal favorites. Hopefully you picked up on some nuggets of wisdom on arsenal building on the way while indulging me with sharing my personal favorites. Again, if you haven't checked out the personal favorites arsenal building explanation, do watch that as it helps you understand the groupings and how I build an arsenal. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell to get notifications. Thanks for watching. All right, welcome back to the last episode in our series of favorite bowling balls. Hopefully you've checked out the other videos. They will be the crux of your arsenal. However, there is another potential slot, and I kind of agonized about this slot a bit. Could this be just weak balls like hustles, for example, or should it be urethane balls? What about other unique balls like the IQ Tour or the Web Tour? Well, with that said, I'm going to cover this category differently than the others. I have no specific number one, but these are balls that I think you should consider as the specialty or wild card ball in your arsenal. For some, these balls could actually slot in another existing category. And for some, a ball in this category will be a must. These are balls that deserve mention, but haven't fit in my bag in any of the other categories. Okay, the first sort of group within this sort of wildcard category I'm going to call weak. And that's what I called the category to begin with. This is what I would consider the more traditional step downs to the mid-late category. And that really is the weak category. I'll start with the Storm High Road Pearl. For me, this is the type of ball that's just under the mid-late category. For some, it fits in the mid-late category. The way I have my arsenal designed, the High Road Pearl is a step down, but not a big step down from that mid-late. And so as a lefty, the difference may not be worth taking an extra spot up in the bag for the mid-late and this ball. One note I will make is that you might be a little bit surprised about this ball being in the weak category. It seems to depend on if you throw 14 or 15 pounds. In 15, the ball, I believe, is more clearly in the mid-late category. And in 14, it seems to be a touch less. If you look at the differential numbers on paper, you'll see what I mean. Okay, continuing in this weak category, these I would say are more traditional step downs from the mid-late. And these are balls like the Columbia 300 Beast, Track Tundra, Ebonite Turbo R, Brunswick Rhino, the Roto Grip Hustle, AU, HSB, and the Motive Thrill. They get down lane quite easily. They generally all have lower differentials for a controllable move. That's clearly overall a step down. They can generate angle on the drier conditions. Sometimes there are conditions where you just need much more stored energy, but the bottom line is these really need friction to do anything for the most part. I really don't have a preference for any of these in particular, as I really need this shape, so just pick your favorite. Okay, the next group I'm going to talk about is a wild card group. There is a specialty category that could also be a wild card in some bags, and that includes balls like the Storm IQ Tour, the Hammer Web Tour, and the Roto Grip Hustle Inc. These are solid covered balls with lower diff cores. We saw the Emerald IQ in my mid-late category video, and you can argue that the IQ Tour could be in the mid-control category, and you wouldn't be wrong. I think you could say that with any of these three balls. You could slot them in. But personally, I don't have the Emerald IQ in my arsenal because it's a touch weaker than I like for that particular category for mid to late. And actually, it's the same situation when you think about the IQ Tour, for example, for mid-control. However, this type of ball motion is definitely worthy as a wild card or your mid-control ball if it happens to fit there. The IQ Tour, Hammer Web Tour, Hustle Link all have similar motions. There are nuances, but fundamentally, if you match their surfaces, they all have a smooth control motion without tons of side-to-side movement. They're capable of side-to-side, but they do have clear limits, more so for lower rev rates. I know many people who don't leave home without one of these in the bag. Again, here, pick your favorite. All three are very good balls. Okay, the next category or subcategory within this wildcard category is called what I call pseudo-urethane. It's a set of wildcard balls that would include something like the Motive Covert Tank, the Storm Pitch Purple, Motive Tank Blitz. They're all pseudo-urethane. They're not really urethane. So none are pure urethane, as it were, nor do they have pure urethane reactions. Covert is probably the closest of these, where it has the earlier role of urethane, but is also capable of much more back end than traditional. You can also drill it high flaring to inflict less damage on the pattern. Tank Blitz is by far the strongest of these three. It is even stronger up front than the Covert, but also a little closer to traditional urethane backhand. So different shape. Pitch Purple, that feels like basically a mild reactive. Definitely closest to actually fitting in the weak category, I would say. I consider them all wild cards, but they could have some overlap with other balls in your bag. They're likely to be much more situational, even while some might use them frequently. If I were to pick one for my specialty slot of this group, probably the Covert Tank would be my favorite reaction. It's different and different from others. Offers something I can relate to other stuff in my bag. There are some characteristics that are similar with the next category, which I'm going to talk about. And that next category is standard urethane or modern urethane. I'm not going to get into that debate. The thought these days is never leave home without urethane. I will tell everyone that when the pros say that, remember, they are pros. They face much more difficult conditions than most of us do. Everything they bowl on is pretty much flat. In other words, really tight patterns. Urethane for them is when patterns are playing extremely difficult and reactive requires more open angles. So urethane allows them to play direct, and because of the soft down lane reaction, it gives them forgiveness. And with their rev rate, they have a better chance of carrying. I'm not going to spend the whole video telling you what to do, since you'll do what you want anyway. But the common urethane balls include the well-known Purple Hammer, Storm Pitch Black, Hammer Black Urethane. There are others like the Rotogrip Hot Cell, the Black Widow Urethane, and those two use huge cores to allow them to flare more and theoretically have less destruction of the pattern. If you expect me to tell you which one is best, unfortunately, I'm not going to do that. There has been enough success with all of them, albeit the Purple Hammer is probably the most visible. I personally have liked the Hot Cell a lot because it is traditional urethane. I still get a little better hit with the bigger core. Bottom line is, if you're a sport shot tournament bowler, you probably want to have urethane over the other balls we talked about as the wild card, or next to them, I guess. That's in the case of, say, you want to have an IQ Tour type of shape. But that's also why I personally chose the Covert Tank when we talked earlier from the group, because it's closest to the traditional urethane, but still gives me, more back end. And generally what most pros who carry urethane have done is learn to shoot spares with the urethane ball. This way, they don't need to take a plastic ball with them. In other words, every slot in the bag is a potential useful strike ball. All right, there you have it. I know this video is done differently than the others, but that is because fundamentally I don't have a favorite in this category. As a medium everything lefty, weak balls and urethane doesn't usually come into play. I do have a fresh Purple Hammer stashed away. All right, I hope you had fun with this series and learned something along the way. I can freely admit that even I learned something. When you think through things logically and you put pen to paper, sometimes you get additional light bulb moments. And that's why I enjoy doing this. And here's to wishing you many more light bulb moments in these uncertain times. Be safe, healthy, and calm. And for God's sake, wash your hands. A little levity on the way out, but take care. See you soon in future videos. Thanks for watching.